Hey, Rick, can you hear me okay there?
I hear you fine. Do you hear me okay?
Hear you, see you. Aside from having to talk to me, good day for you so far?
It's a very good day, and I think this will only enhance it, quite honestly. At
Well,
least I'm hoping so.
well, thanks to this, we came in touch, or got in touch rather, but your credits, it's just icing on the top. So I know you've had a successful career as a producer and a songwriter. This is also not your first literary piece. You're a journalist, music industry executive. But what was the original plan? Are you a writer that went to the business dark side, or what are you?
I think I'm a little bit of everything. I started writing, and I started my music career at about the same age of 12. When I was 12, I wrote and published a sports newspaper that I sold the 4 carbon copies of to my 4 neighbors. And at the same time, I was also starting to play in bands, in rock and roll bands, very early on in rock and roll. I was, gosh, that would be 56, 57. In fact, I went from guitar to bass, electric bass, and I got a bass that had serial number 2. So it was pretty early on, back when the Ventures did Walk, Don't Run and kind of popularized the electric bass. But anyway, so I did that. And then when I was 15, I wrote a play. When I was in college, I was a film major. And so I was writing film scripts for the student films. But all this time, I was also playing in bands. And in the late 60s, early 70s, I co-wrote a science fiction rock opera. And I don't know, do you know who Robert Stigwood is?
Oh, yes, RSO.
Yes. Well, Robert, I was being managed at the time by Sid Bernstein, the man who brought the Beatles and the Stones to the States, and Leonard Bernstein's producer, John McClure, was producing this rock opera. And they brought it to many people, but Stig was one of the people they brought it to. And Stigwood said, I really love this, but I've got another rock opera that I'm also considering producing.
The Paul Williams one?
Well, actually, it ended up being Evita, and he chose Evita over ours. That wasn't the death knell of the rock opera. It had another little incarnation, if you will, that had to do with a really older gentleman who married a really younger woman, and he went off on his honeymoon. And when he came back, he was going to actually fund it to be a Broadway play. And he died on his honeymoon, and his wife came back and said, I'm not funding any rock opera, sorry. But anyway, so and then over the course of my career, so then I went into I was producing records. I mean, I produced over 50 records. One of them got
Bobby Rydell and disco and all over the place.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Platters and many others. So I was playing, I was producing, and I got offered a job to run a small independent record label, because when I was in college, I did an internship for a record label as a promotion man. And I did so well, I ended up becoming the regional promotion man instead of just an intern. And so because I had that experience, this startup independent record label hired me to run the company, and I did. And then from there, I went into another series of jobs in the music industry, working my way up the corporate ladder at various companies. Much of the time writing songs and stuff. I was also writing newspaper columns. I was writing chapters for nonfiction books on world music and all sorts of different things. And I spent the vast majority of the rest of my career as an executive in the music industry.
Right, BMG and yes.
Right, the Phonodisc, which is now Polygram, and BMG. And I did work, I strongly consulted to Profile, who had Run DMC.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I did the marketing on Crush Groove, which was the first ever rap movie.
Yeah.
And I did... So then I decided, my wife was also in the music industry. In fact, she was in the classical end, and one of her main projects claim to fame projects was the Three Tenors album. And she did a lot of work with Pavarotti and some of the others. But anyway, we both decided to retire from the music industry, left New York City, moved to Ashland, Oregon. And I joined boards of directors. I was on the Shakespeare Festival Board of Directors. I was on the Film Festival Board of Directors. I was on the Food Bank. I was in the University President's Council. And I got bored not using everything that I had built up. And I'm a type A personality, man. I can't sit still and do nothing.
Join the club.
And what happened was a very good friend of mine and my wife's, who owns the audio rights to Winnie the Pooh, came down to Ashland, where we lived, to license those rights to Blackstone, which he did. And he stayed with us while he was down here, of course. And he mentioned my wife and I to Craig Black, who was the founder and owner of Blackstone, and said, they have this corporate New York experience that you don't have anybody in your company that has. You could probably use it, and I'll bet they're kind of like bored. So make a long story short, the next week we had lunch with Craig, and Craig said, I don't really know what I'm going to do with you, but I know I need what you've got. And he hired us as consultants, and we were on his first board of directors. My wife retired, and I went on staff with Blackstone. I've been there ever since, and that's 16 years. Coincidentally, and a couple of years later, our next door neighbor was in a writing group. She was a poet. And we started talking, and she said to me, you've told me you've written. Would you like to join our group? And I said, well, I've never really written fiction, And she goes, well, we have poets, we have nonfiction writers, fiction writers, just join us. And so I started writing short stories. And the book, Pinyon Scorpion, actually started as a short story that I wrote as part of that group. And it got such a positive reaction that they basically said to me, we love these characters, we love what you're doing, you've got to expand it into a book. And so over the course of the next 4 years, while also working on some other books that will never see the light of day, I expanded it into a book, and now I'm both an author and a publishing executive. And that kind of in a nutshell, a long nutshell, is what my career has been about. And I've done other things. Like, are you familiar with what used to be called the Spectacolor sign on Times Square on the building where the apple drops?
Yes.
Well, I did a deal with them, and I created a company called Your Name and Lights on Broadway. And what I did is people could hire putting messages on that board, like happy birthday, baby, or happy anniversary, Donna, or, something like that. And I did a direct marketing campaign, hired a direct mail company, to go direct to the public. It was an abysmal failure. So, and I owned a video selling company, videotape, where I would resell videos, pre-recorded videos. I just sort of my whole life been entrepreneurial, if you will, or as I like to say, I've always loved chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And whether I found it or not, I found the chase the most exhilarating part.
Yes. Like Motorhead's song, the chase is better than the catch.
Exactly. And I worked Motorhead and Lemmy.
Yeah, so that is kind of a recurring theme where you're this person who found success as a creative and a business person. Not very often is that the case, because the music business, my opinion as somebody who's survived it and still occasionally consults, is it's full of people who, that adage of those who can't do teach, those who teach can't do. It's kind of like you meet the head of A&R and you go, oh, are you a songwriter? And they go, can't sing a lick, can't play anything, etc. You're one of your old clients, Clive Davis, can't write a song, but he, in a way, knows what a hit song is. In your case, you know what it is and you can write it.
Well, I have run into a few more people than you might suspect who do share both. For example, when I was at Polygram, in the A&R department, were Chip Taylor, who wrote Wild Thing and Angel in the Morning, and Ted Darrell, who wrote for Jay and the Americans and had come some of their hits, and Steve Katz, who was the lead guitarist in Blood, Sweat, and Tears and the Blues Project. But I've also, you're absolutely right, met many executives where they're executives and they couldn't be creators. And I met many creators who are just wild, crazy creators, and there is no way they are a business head, and that's why they have business managers. I've been fortunate. I come from a father who was a painter, he was an inventor. He had like over 200 patents, but he was also a businessman. He was general manager of Steinway Pianos at one point. He was an electrical engineer. He worked with Einstein at one point. And I have a mother who was an educator. She was a university educator, but she was also a singer on the radio. So I think part of what I had in my background was just, fortunately, the convergence of genes that gave me a little right brain, left brain, as opposed to all one or the other. And I had a boss that once paid me a pretty good compliment. He said, I've worked with a lot of people that have great ideas, but very few of them know how to actually carry them out.
Yeah, executing those. Yeah.
And that's your talent, Rick. You can do both. And I'm not bragging. I just found that pleasing. And I guess it does kind of sum up, that's who I am.
Yeah, and going down that list, another person who I know you worked with, who I feel similarly about has the ideas and get the ideas done, is Gene Simmons of Kiss, who you worked with pretty early into the success of Kiss. So at this point in time, I'd have to imagine it's like you're creative like 30% of the time, and then it's business 70. Like the creativity is more the nights and the weekends.
Well, it mostly, well, it wasn't like that until the mid 70s when I really got into record companies as an executive. Before that, it was almost all creative. Once I got in there, yeah, I would say it was like 70 business and 30 creative. Up until Scorbion, it was about 70-30 or 80-20 or 90-10 business. But now with Scorbion and the fact that it's achieving some modicum of success, it's maybe getting closer to 60-40. And maybe it'll go 50-50 at some point. I don't ever really want to give up the business side because I enjoy it too much. You know, I could retire if I wanted to now. I don't want to retire. I enjoy it too much. I like the authors I work with. I like the people I work with. I like the work. Work isn't work when you're enjoying it.
Well said. With the idea of retiring, a lot of the people who go, I want to retire, and you go, to do what? And they don't have that answer of what they're going to do. I have a feeling that if you retired, you'd be retiring to write books and think of marketing plans.
Exactly. And I'd rather do that while I'm working with Blackstone and can help other authors than just do it in a bubble, if you will. Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things that I really hope people glean from me and my experience with this book especially is you're not ever too old to try something new and pursue your dreams.
Right.
You know, if I hadn't have done something, nothing would have happened to me. So take shots, chase your rainbows. You know, until the day they put you in the ground, you don't have to stop.
Yeah, a good number of the people that you've had success with in marketing were like, they were successful when they were 21. And then there's a lot of other people who didn't really make it until their 40s or 50s, or they had that initial success. Like, look at the guys behind This Is Spinal Tap, which is something that you worked on. Sure, it's a big movie, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
Didn't show any profits on paper until last year, until they sued Universal, but that's not the point. Those guys are now all A-listers. Now everyone wants to be in business with Harry Shearer.
I know.
But, you know, he was part of SNL when no one cared about it. Christopher Guest for a lot of years. Oh yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis's husband. Yeah.
Right.
Michael McKean. He was part of also one of the worst SNL casts ever. And then fast forward 20 years, Better Call Saul, etc.
Right.
So you're also, you know, proof of long-term success. It may not be the most visible, immediate success, but consistency through doing things for a long time.
I totally agree. And, you know, I have taught courses at universities as well. And one of the things I've always taught the younger people is if you want to get from point A to point B, it isn't always the straight line that gets you there.
Right.
Sometimes you have to go to the left or the right and try something different, and then it'll get you eventually where you're going. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is hang in there and things build upon each other to an ultimate success.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun with this is Spinal Tap project. I mean, that was, I would have to say, it was the single most creative marketing plan I think I've ever created that happened to be a generally abysmal failure in a short term.
In the short term.
In the short term.
But is there a more quoted music-related movie ever made?
Oh, absolutely not. And you know, it wasn't the film that was the abysmal failure, unfortunately. It was the soundtrack album. It was the film itself, you know, it's a classic. I mean, there's no question. You're absolutely right. It's quoted, it's everything. And it really was. The problem is that the guys really wanted their album to be able to get to chart and be popular. Mm-hmm. And what we found was that even though we put a really cool, fun marketing plan together for it that mirrored the film, the radio stations found the songs to be too funny to be taken serious and too serious to be totally funny. It wasn't Weird Yankovic, and when it wasn't Metallica, you know, I mean, it was somewhere in between. And that was the biggest problem we had, that radio just didn't take it as seriously as we had hoped they would.
But you just said Metallica. Would Metallica have had the Black Album without Spinal Tap?
Probably not.
Probably not. So you indirectly helping market a film that became successful long term. That's kind of a feather in your cap of, maybe that would not have happened without me. And do you think we'll ever see a memoir of your tales in rock and roll?
Well, I have written part of it. And I would say two things. First of all, I think I'm waiting until I see what happens with my writing career, so I can maybe put a period at the end of the sentence of that memoir. And then the other question really becomes, to hardcore music junkies, and you seem to be one and I'm one,
sure.
The behind the scenes stuff I've been involved with is probably interesting because of who I'm writing about and what I'm writing about. And it wouldn't be a tell-all book as much as wow, these are some cool adventures.
Sure.
But to the general public, they don't know who Rick Bleiweiss is, you know, so why would they come and pick up a book I've written about my life when they don't even know who I am? I'm not Keith Richard.
I think that every now and then you find a behind the scenes person who becomes a big star because the names that they are able to talk about, the people that come to the forefront that go, this guy is one of the best, you know, what do they call that? The praise quotes I can't think of what the term is.
The endorsements.
The endorsements, the quotes on the back of the book that say, without this person, I would be nothing. And then that success, I guess, leads to more success. That's my feeling on that a publication would want exclusively a chapter or an excerpt. And then from there, people go, oh, that Rick Bleiweiss. Yeah, I've known Ricky. They'll make up a nickname. Actually, does anyone call you Ricky?
No, not since I was probably about 9.
I think it would be the kind of thing where to show you, people go, oh yeah, me and Ricky used to work together in blank. So it's interesting to hear that you have that perspective where you know you're successful, but there's also not an ego about that success.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it interests you, when I get closer to having it done, if you'd be interested, I'd be happy to send it to you and get your opinion of what you think. I'm serious.
Please. And if that would include the story about you taking a Gene Simmons out of makeup to a concert in Forest Hills, Queens, out of fear for him
That's
to
already
be
written.
recognized.
That's already written. Yes.
That's already written.
I mean, look, I couldn't blame him because they were not seen outside their makeup. And, they were all kind of like protective. I don't want to use the word paranoid. I'd rather use the word protective of people not recognizing them. I just didn't really expect that I was going to be his lookout more than his date.
I'd have to imagine that was a rarity. That was your first being the lookout kind of experience.
I think it probably was. It may have been my only in terms of lookout. But yeah, I've got to tell you, you were talking about Gene earlier, and I have to tell you that I think personally that Gene Simmons is one of the most outstanding marketing minds I have ever met in my life.
Without a doubt.
And I, when I first got introduced to them and was told I was going to be working on marketing their records by the guys at Casablanca, their label, I went to Kiss's manager. His name was Bill LaCoin.
Yes.
I went to Bill's office and I came prepared with a marketing plan. And I don't remember which album it was. It might have been Love Gun. It might have been Dynasty. I don't remember which one it was. I think it might have been Dynasty because I remember the minute I heard I Was Made for Loving You, I went, this is a smash. But I go to their office with the marketing plan that I've put together. And I walk in, they tell me to sit down at the conference table. Gene's there, Bill's there. I sit down and Gene goes, listen, before you tell us what you want to do, let me tell you what I think we should do. And he unfurled a complete and entire marketing plan. And I wrote a good one. His was better. I have no shame in saying that. And from that moment, I just went, wow.
Yes. He's one of those people that people don't connect the dots of all the success he's had. The average person who's not a music diehard would go like, yep, Rock and Roll All Night and Kiss, and I Was Made for, and Beth, and I Was Made for Loving You, and that's that. And they don't realize all the real estate and the intellectual property he's trademarked, and he got 3 or 4 different companies to bankroll a record company for him where it wasn't his money. And I think 2 or 3 film studios where it was somebody else's money.
Right. And what about the fact that they have Kiss tchotchkes and merchandise in 3
coffins,
product categories? I mean, come on, this is just genius marketing.
Exactly. And to have done that for 40 to 50 years and not giving up when things were really dire for Kiss around 84, 85, 86. Reinventing themselves. Now, Did they follow some bad trends? Yes, there was some Paul Stanley rapping kind of stuff. But, I can say the same about you and what you have accomplished as a behind the scenes music, entertainment, marketing kind of person, where I can't just go, Rick, he's an 80s guy, or Rick, he's a 90s guy. You're kind of decadeless to be able to have worked with Spinal Tap and the Bee Gees and Melissa Etheridge, 3 different decades right there.
Well, I mean, I'll even go further. I did work with Alicia Keys. I did work with Pink. I mean, I left the music industry in 2002. So I think I worked really in the music industry from the 70s to the early 2000s. So, it was early 70s, early 2000s. So it was quite a ride. And thank you. Can I say one more thing about Gene that relates to me and Scorbion?
Sure.
Gene had 5 principles, business principles that he believed he should live by and what made him and Kiss successful. Mm-hmm. And I took those and applied every one of them to what I did in trying to do Scorbion. And I'll take you through them very, very quickly.
Sure.
One was you need people to like what you do. In other words, give them quality content. So the first thing I tried to do was write a quality book. The second thing is, he calls it use the right language. It's really know your target audience and what they want. And for me, the target audience was people who love Poirot and love Sherlock Holmes. And so I tried to write in a style that they would bond with and go, oh, this feels familiar. The next was, if you want to hit a bullseye, don't use a bullet, use a bomb. You know, really, I mean, that's Kiss, if there ever was anything you could say about it.
Oh, so over the top that even if it's a failure, as long as it's a big failure, in a way that's a big success.
Right. And in that regard, I created a marketing plan for the book that includes creating a video game, a video trailer, a theme song that I wrote and recorded, an author logo. And I'm hired a PR firm that, that really is a good one. And so I'm really, again, trying to bomb it as opposed to bullet it. The fourth thing he said is produce your content for your close community, but push your boundaries. And so again, the close community to me was my friends, people that supported me and I supported over my career. But at the same time, I wanted to push my boundaries to get to the public at large. So, so that's part of my social media push, was that. And the last thing was understand that nothing appeals to everyone. And it's advice that I give to other aspiring authors is you can't let rejection or bad reviews get you down, because nobody is there's nothing that's ever been produced that I know of in the arts, no matter what the art, where universally everybody said, I love it, with no dissent. And I've had a couple of reviews that I didn't like or agree with. Fortunately, the majority of them have been glowing, but you got to ignore them, live with the positives in life.
Yeah, I've tried to do that before, where you say, what is liked by everybody? And somebody will go pizza. And like, my dad doesn't like pizza. He's maybe the only person I've ever met that doesn't like pizza. Yeah, you go like The Simpsons. My wife doesn't really like cartoons. She can tolerate The Simpsons, but not everyone likes The Simpsons. You can't find one thing. I'm not a sci-fi guy, so Star Wars was never it for me. I like it. I don't love it.
Right.
The Beatles, every now and then you'll find a contrarian who wants to show that they're cool by going, yeah, I don't like the Beatles.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
So
look, Harry Potter was rejected by a number of publishers. Barbara Streisand was rejected by record companies. I'll tell you the one that I was closest to. I was sitting in my office one day, and the head of A&R from Mercury Records comes into my office and he goes, there's a demo I got, I absolutely love. It's by this group called Trigger. And I said, you want to play it for me? He plays it for me. I go, that's a home run. I mean, that's a hit. He brings it to his bosses who own, or ran Mercury at the time. And they said, we don't hear it. We just don't hear it. Well, Trigger was Foreigner. And the demo was literally, feels like the first time in Cold as Ice, almost literally the way that came out. So you never know.
Yeah, and still you might play that Foreigner 4 album for somebody who's 16 years old and they go, this is old people music, I don't get it. So you really can't play to everybody. So that was Gene's 5th principle?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Wow.
Just understand, not everybody's going to love you. You can't play to everyone.
There you go. So covering what I've learned today, the work still continues. The creative process continues. You're happy with this book. You can't please everyone, but as long as you're happy with it, that works. Gene Simmons is a genius. Blackstone has been good to you. Yeah. Ashland, Oregon is apparently a gem that people have not yet discovered. Anything that we've missed, Rick, and not Ricky?
Well, I'll just throw these things in. I've just finished writing the second book in the Scorbion series. Hopefully it will be a series of more than just 2 books, but certainly the first 2, and that'll come out next year, a year from now. There are 2 production companies in the UK that are looking at Scorbion to potentially turn it into either a TV series or a film. And I have a short story coming in a short story anthology of mystery stories in May from Blackstone called Hotel California, where every story in the song, the title of the story, is a title of a song in the album, even though the content of the story have nothing to do with the content of the songs. And there's a new Jack Reacher story in there. There's stories by Heather Graham, Amanda Flower, Reed Farrell Coleman. I'm in great company. I'm the least known author in that anthology, but and that's a contemporary story I've written featuring a hitman in New York who has a hit put on his life, and it goes wrong, and he escapes to Hawaii, and it becomes the cat and mouse game between him and the hitman sent to finish him off in Hawaii. And then this is part of a murder and music series of anthologies, and I'm going to have a story in every one of them. The next one's Thriller, and the one after that's Back in Black. So we're going after the biggest albums of all time.
Paltrocast.